For as long as I can remember, I've dreamt of owning a luxury car. Growing up, I would often pass by sleek, high-end vehicles on the streets, imagining what it would be like to own one. The Tesla Model S became my ultimate dream car. Its futuristic design, powerful performance, and environmental impact made it the perfect symbol of success. At 25, I was finally in a position to make that dream a reality, but there was one catch. I couldn't afford it on my own. That's when my parents stepped in, offering to take out an $80,000 loan to help me get the car I had always wanted. At the time, I couldn't have been more excited. It felt like the ultimate reward for all my hard work, but I had no idea that this dream come true would soon turn into an overwhelming burden. Ever since I was a child, I had been fascinated by cars. I remember being captivated by the sleek lines and roaring engines of luxury cars whenever I saw them on the road or in magazines. There was something about the polished chrome, the high-tech interiors, and the feeling of power that drew me in. As I grew older, I realized that cars like the Tesla Model S weren't just about luxury. They represented something deeper, a symbol of success, independence, and achievement. They embodied the idea of having made it in life. And for someone like me, who always wanted to prove themselves, owning such a car was a dream. Growing up in a middle-class family, the concept of owning a high-end car felt like an unreachable goal. I watched my parents work tirelessly to provide for our family, and while I appreciated everything they did, I knew that luxury cars weren't in our budget. Still, the dream lingered in the back of my mind. I focused on my education and career, determined to one day be in a position to buy the car I had always admired. As I entered adulthood, I found myself in a stable job and slowly starting to build up savings. But no matter how much I saved, I knew it would take years to afford something like the Tesla Model S on my own. The dream seemed further away than ever. It wasn't until my parents saw how hard I was working and how much this car meant to me that they made the decision to help. My dad, in particular, always said, "If you work hard enough, you can make anything happen." And when the idea of the car came up, they were eager to help make it a reality for me. To them, it wasn't just about the car. It was about supporting their child's dreams and helping me achieve what they could never afford when they were my age. In their eyes, it was a reward for my perseverance and ambition. The thought of having the symbol of success so early in life seemed too good to pass up, and with their support, the dream was finally within reach. It felt surreal at first. The car I had admired for so long was now within my grasp, and I was determined to make the most of this opportunity. My excitement was palpable, but deep down, I never realized the weight that would come with that dream. The decision to go for it, with my parents taking on a massive loan, marked the beginning of a chapter one wasn't fully prepared for. The moment I first sat behind the wheel of the Tesla Model S, I felt a rush of excitement that was beyond anything I had ever experienced. The smooth leather seats, the futuristic dashboard, the quiet hum of the electric engine, everything about it was perfect. It wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of everything I had worked for, a tangible representation of my dreams coming true. I could barely contain my joy as I took the car for its first drive. The world seemed to slow down as I cruised through the streets, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for my entire life. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged to a certain class, a group of people who had made it. The luxury of the car was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Everywhere I went, people looked at me with admiration, and I loved it. The feeling of owning a high-end vehicle was intoxicating. I had worked hard for this moment, and now I was reaping the rewards. The car became more than just a mode of transportation. It became a status symbol. Whether I was driving through the city or just taking a weekend road trip, I felt like I had reached a milestone in life that few people ever get to experience. At first, everything was perfect. I would show it off to my friends, post pictures on social media, and revel in the compliments. It was the kind of validation I had always craved. My parents, too, were proud. They saw the happiness it brought me, and that made them feel like they had made the right decision in helping me. For a while, it felt like I was living in a dream. The car had become my identity, a reflection of my ambition and hard work. It seemed like the world was mine for the taking, and nothing could bring me down. But as the days went by, the initial excitement started to fade, and I began to realize that owning such a luxury car wasn't all it seemed to be. While the high of the acquisition kept me going, I started to feel the growing weight of the responsibility attached to it. I couldn't shake the nagging thought that I was living in a world of superficial admiration. People admired me for the car, but I wondered if they truly saw me for who I was. In a way, I had become defined by a material object, something that was not inherently tied to my character or my achievements, but to something my parents had financed. As the days turned into weeks, I started to notice the strain the car was putting on my finances. The monthly payments were no small amount, and with my parents' loan hanging over me, I was constantly reminded of the weight of my decisions. The car had become a symbol of success, but also of the debt I was now responsible for. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a constant reminder of my obligations, of the pressure to maintain the lifestyle I had once imagined was perfect. The rush of owning my dream car was undeniably thrilling, but as time went on, I began to feel the pressure building. The financial strain, the weight of the loan, and the nagging feeling that I was more invested in a material object than in my own personal growth started to erode the joy I once felt. What had begun as a dream come true slowly started to feel more like a burden. At first, the pressures of owning the Tesla Model S didn't seem obvious. The excitement from the car's sleek design, the feeling of status it provided, and the rush of driving a high-end electric vehicle masked any concerns that were starting to quietly creep up in the background. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle signs that the dream was beginning to turn into a source of anxiety. The first indication that something was off happened one morning when I checked my bank account. I had made the monthly payment for the car loan, and the amount remaining was shockingly low. For a moment, I had that gut-wrenching feeling that I'd miscalculated or missed a bill. I had been so focused on the excitement of driving around in my new car that I hadn't paid enough attention to the mounting costs that came with it. The payments were hefty, way more than I had initially anticipated. Even though my parents had agreed to help, I still felt a deep sense of responsibility for covering the costs myself. That's when the first real wave of anxiety hit. I started to look at my financials with a more critical eye. I had taken out a loan from my parents for the car, but that was only part of the equation. Insurance on the Tesla was significantly higher than I had expected, and I had to factor in the maintenance costs as well. While electric vehicles require less routine maintenance than traditional cars, the ones they do need were expensive. A single tire replacement could cost more than what I had anticipated, and I hadn't accounted for things like the annual registration fees or the unexpected need for software updates. But the financial pressure wasn't just about the car payments. It was about how my lifestyle was beginning to change. With the car came the constant urge to maintain appearances, to show up at social events with my shiny new ride, and to take weekend trips just to prove to myself that I deserved it. I had become obsessed with the idea that I had made it and needed to prove it to others. The pressure to keep up with this image was slowly starting to eat away at my peace of mind. The car that once represented success was beginning to symbolize something I didn't want it to: insecurity. I found myself avoiding conversations with friends who I knew would ask me about the car or what I was doing with it. I was ashamed that I couldn't always afford the extra luxuries that came with it: the trips, the dinners, the endless Instagram-worthy moments. I began to see the car not as a symbol of achievement, but as an expensive tool I had to manage, one that was limiting my freedom and starting to drain my happiness. In addition to the financial strain, there was the psychological burden that came with the car's existence. It felt like my entire identity had become tied to the vehicle. I was constantly worried that people would think less of me if I drove anything less than the Tesla, as though my value was linked to the car. The freedom I had once felt driving the car was slowly replaced by a sense of being trapped in a cycle of pressure. I no longer just enjoyed driving it for the sake of driving. I felt I had to drive it to maintain my image. This psychological pressure was compounded by the growing realization that I was not financially stable enough to carry such a significant debt. The weight of the loan felt more, and more suffocating. I would lay awake at night, thinking about how much longer I could keep this up. Could I continue making the payments while also saving for the future? Was this debt going to haunt me for years? The uncertainty about my finances grew stronger with every passing month. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the toll it was taking on my emotional well-being. The excitement of having my dream car had been replaced by constant worry. The joy of cruising through the streets had faded into the background, overshadowed by the constant ticking clock of the loan's due date. I began to feel like I was on the edge of a precipice, balancing between the dream I had once cherished and the reality that was proving to be far more complex than I had ever imagined. Looking back, I can see how easily I became ensnared in the illusion of instant gratification. I had been so focused on the short-term thrill of owning a luxury car that I didn't fully grasp the long-term responsibilities it would bring. The first signs of pressure were subtle, but they quickly began to take hold. At that moment, I realized that the dream car wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a source of stress and constant anxiety. The emotional toll that the Tesla Model S began to take on me was undeniable, but what really hit hard was the way it started to affect my relationship with my family. My parents, who had been so supportive in helping me get the car, began to express concerns, not just about the financial burden, but about the emotional strain they could see in me. They could tell that something had changed since I got the car. The excitement that had once filled my conversations had turned into a quiet anxiety, and I was no longer the carefree person they had known. At first, I tried to hide it. I didn't want them to feel like their help was in vain. I wanted to maintain the image that everything was fine, that the car was everything I dreamed of and more. But my parents, being as perceptive as they are, noticed the subtle shifts in my behavior. The late nights I spent obsessively looking over my finances, the quiet sighs when I received bills, the way I became withdrawn at family gatherings. They saw it all. One night, after a particularly stressful week of juggling loan payments and car-related expenses, my dad pulled me aside. He asked if I was okay, and before I could even think of an answer, I broke down. The pressure had been mounting, and it finally came to a head. I realized I was carrying not only the burden of the loan, but also the weight of my parents' expectations. They had helped me achieve my dream, but now I was feeling like I was letting them down by struggling with it. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the emotional weight of the promise I had made to myself and to them. My parents had worked hard to support me, and here I was, unable to fully enjoy the dream that they had enabled me to chase. Instead, I was consumed by guilt. I felt as though I had let my parents down because I wasn't fully appreciating the gift they had given me. Every time I looked at the car, I didn't see a symbol of success. I saw a reminder of my growing anxiety. The emotional toll also extended to my relationship with my friends. I began to withdraw from them as well. Knowing that they had their own financial realities and weren't wrapped up in the same kind of stress I was facing, I felt a deep sense of isolation. It was hard to explain to anyone why the car that should have been the epitome of success had become the thing I feared most. My friends saw the car as a symbol of luxury and accomplishment, while I saw it as a looming deadline I had to meet every month. But it wasn't just the emotional toll on me that weighed heavily. It was a strain on my family dynamics as well. My parents had sacrificed a lot to help me get the car, and though they never openly expressed regret, I could tell that they were quietly concerned. They had watched me go from excited and motivated to stressed and anxious. I began to notice the way my dad would pause before asking about the car, or how my mom would offer to help without me even asking. Their concern was heartfelt, but it only made me feel more guilty. I didn't want them to feel responsible for my struggles, but at the same time, I didn't know how to shoulder this burden alone. This sense of guilt also affected how I viewed my future. The pressure to maintain the car and its associated expenses seemed like an endless cycle. I was consumed with the fear that if I couldn't handle it, I'd be disappointing everyone who had invested in my dream. In some ways, I started to question my own decisions. Did I really need the car? Was it worth the strain it was putting on me? Both financially and emotionally? I knew I could have been happier without the car, but by then, it was too late to take it back. One afternoon, After a particularly difficult conversation with my mom, I realized that my emotional well-being and my relationship with my family were more important than the car. I had let the pressure and the guilt cloud my judgment, and I had failed to consider the long-term emotional costs. I began to talk more openly with my parents about how I was feeling. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. They reassured me that they didn't regret helping me, but they also made it clear that they didn't want me to feel trapped by the decision. The emotional toll was not something I had anticipated when I first got the car. I had envisioned nothing but joy and excitement, but what I got instead was an overwhelming sense of guilt, anxiety,
and stress.
The burden of the debt and the expectation to uphold an image began to tear away at my mental and emotional health. Most importantly, it started to affect the very relationships that I had once cherished. The strain of trying to keep up with the car payments and maintain the lifestyle that came with it put unnecessary pressure on me and, in turn, on my family. In the end, the emotional toll wasn't just about the money. It was about the way it shifted my mindset and strained my relationships. I realized that the true cost of the car wasn't just financial, it was the emotional burden it placed on everyone involved. After months of mounting pressure, both emotionally and financially, I knew that I needed to find a way out. The joy I once felt driving my dream car had been replaced by constant anxiety about the looming payments. I had become fixated on the debt, and it was eating away at me both mentally and physically. My family's concerns were growing, and it felt like I was living in a never-ending cycle of guilt. I needed to figure out how to alleviate the weight that the car had become in my life. The first step in my search for a solution was acknowledging that I couldn't continue on the same path. I had hoped that somehow things would get easier, that I'd find a way to just make it work over time, but the reality was much more complicated than I had expected. The mounting interest, the maintenance costs, and the fear of missing payments were taking a toll on my health and well-being. I started to realize that the dream car I had once longed for had become a burden that was no longer worth the emotional and financial strain. I began by sitting down with my parents to have an honest discussion. For the first time, I openly admitted that I was struggling. I could feel their concern, but they reassured me that they wanted to help however they could. It was a relief to finally get everything off my chest. Together, we brainstormed options. Should I sell the car and pay off the loan? Should I refinance it to reduce the monthly payments? Should I find ways to cut down on other expenses to make the payments more manageable? The thought of selling the car felt like a defeat, but I knew it might be the best option. However, I didn't want to give up on my dream entirely, so I needed to explore all alternatives first. I started by speaking with financial advisors and exploring loan consolidation options. There were potential solutions to lower my monthly payments, but they often came with longer loan terms, meaning I'd be tied to the debt for an even longer period. On top of that, I was now facing interest that was compounded and steadily growing. Refinancing didn't seem like the perfect solution, but it was one of the more viable options I had. Another option was cutting back on my lifestyle, downsizing my apartment, limiting luxury purchases, and even considering taking on a side job to boost my income. It felt like a lot, but I was willing to try anything to relieve the pressure. However, as I started to dig deeper into the numbers, the reality hit harder than I expected. Even if I made sacrifices in other areas of my life, the car's loan was still a heavy weight to carry. It wasn't just the payments, it was the emotional baggage attached to it. Every time I looked at the car, I was reminded of the weight of my family's expectations and the guilt I felt for not being able to manage the financial burden they had helped me take on. The solution wasn't as simple as refinancing or cutting back on other expenses. The true solution, I began to realize, was reevaluating my entire approach to life and finances. I began to look at my situation from a broader perspective. What did I truly value, and what was I willing to sacrifice for those values? My dream car, while an incredible achievement, no longer aligned with my goals and the person I wanted to become. I realized that the car was not just a symbol of success, it had become a symbol of my inability to live within my means. My friends and family had supported me throughout my journey, but now it was time to support myself by making difficult but necessary decisions. as I took a step back to reassess. I also started looking at the bigger picture. Was this car worth everything I had sacrificed? The car was just a material possession, and while it had made me feel proud at first, the pride quickly gave way to stress and guilt. I didn't want to lose the support of my family, and I didn't want to be defined by a car. I needed to find a way to live within my means, to take responsibility for my choices without feeling burdened by them. I considered returning the car or selling it, and although that felt like admitting defeat, I began to see it as a way to regain control over my life and my finances. The solutions I found weren't easy to accept, but they were necessary. It wasn't just about cutting down on spending or changing my lifestyle. It was about learning to live with integrity and taking responsibility for the choices I had made. In the end, finding a solution wasn't just about paying off the debt. It was about regaining peace of mind and understanding what was truly important in my life. While the dream car had been a symbol of success, I realized that my real success lay in the ability to recognize when things weren't working and to take steps to change them. In the end, I didn't just want to pay off the debt. I wanted to find balance in my life, to let go of the pressure I had placed on myself, and to move forward in a way that didn't compromise my emotional and financial well-being. As the pressure to repay the loan mounted, I found myself facing a stark question. Was the dream car really worth all the sacrifice, stress, and emotional toll it had caused? At first, the car represented everything I had ever wanted. It was a symbol of success, an accomplishment that I could show off to the world. It was a tangible result of years of hard work, something that I had earned in my mind. But as the months went by and the reality of the loan started to sink in, the car quickly transformed from a dream into a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. Looking at the car now, I can't help but question whether it's truly fulfilling the purpose I thought it would. Yes, it's beautiful and fast, everything I had imagined, but in return, it has cost me my peace of mind. The constant pressure to keep up with payments, the fear of being late, the guilt I feel about my family's involvement, it's all far more than I had bargained for. The excitement I once felt when I slid into the driver's seat has been replaced with a growing anxiety every time I hear the loan's due date approaching. I've come to realize that the value of the car extends beyond the money spent. It's also about the emotional weight of knowing my parents took on a massive debt to make it happen. It's no longer just about me and my desires. It's about the responsibility I now carry, knowing they are counting on me to pay it back. While I initially thought the car was a reward for my hard work, it now feels more like a reminder of my shortcomings. The joy I expected to feel when driving it has been overshadowed by the constant reminder of my financial burden. What has truly shifted for me is the understanding that this car was never really the achievement I thought it was. Yes, it's an amazing vehicle, but it's just a thing, a material object. What I had failed to consider at the time of purchasing it was the long-term impact it would have on my life. I hadn't fully understood the implications of such a large financial commitment and how it would affect not just my finances, but my emotional well-being. The weight of this realization hit me hard as I watched my family struggle alongside me. My parents had always been there for me, but now I felt like I was putting them in a difficult position. I've come to understand that true success isn't about owning flashy things or keeping up with the latest trends. It's about finding balance and security in your life. The dream car, in all its glory, doesn't provide that. It's an investment that's not paying off the way I had envisioned. While it's great to have something to show for hard work, it's more important to have peace of mind and the freedom to pursue other dreams without feeling tethered to an enormous debt. In hindsight, I wonder if the car was worth the price, not just financially, but emotionally. There's a part of me that still loves it, that still feels proud of having achieved this level of success. But I can't ignore the consequences it has brought into my life. The constant stress, the pressure to meet payments, and the strain on my relationship with my family have made me question whether it was all worth it. Maybe it was a lesson in understanding that dreams can sometimes be more complicated than we imagine. Sometimes, the things we think will bring us happiness can end up bringing us more stress than satisfaction. As I reflect on my experience, I realize that the car itself wasn't the problem. It was my perception of what it represented. I was looking for validation in a material object, and in doing so, I lost sight of what truly matters. True fulfillment doesn't come from possessions. It comes from within. The question now isn't whether the car was worth it, but whether I can move forward and find a new, healthier way to define success that doesn't involve living under the weight of debt. As I face the reality of my financial situation and the burden of the loan, I've come to a crucial realization. The road ahead will require a new mindset and a fresh perspective. I can no longer allow myself to define success by the things I own or the debt I carry. This experience has taught me that true fulfillment isn't about material possessions, but about finding balance, managing responsibility, and maintaining peace of mind. Moving forward, I'm committed to reassessing my priorities. I've learned that while it's important to chase dreams, they should be pursued in a way that aligns with long-term stability. I'm starting to focus on building a future where financial independence and emotional well-being come first, rather than the fleeting excitement of acquiring things. I plan to pay off the loan, but more importantly, I'll ensure that my future decisions are more thoughtful, balanced, and rooted in a healthier sense of achievement. This journey has been difficult, but it's also an opportunity for growth. With this new perspective, I feel more equipped to make choices that will lead to a better, more fulfilling life, one that's not defined by debt or external validation, but by peace, personal growth, and financial freedom. The road ahead may be challenging, but I'm ready to navigate it with a clearer understanding of what truly matters. Looking back, I realized that the dream car, which once seemed like the ultimate symbol of success and freedom, came with a heavy price, one I wasn't fully prepared for. The excitement and thrill of driving it quickly gave way to the weight of financial strain and the emotional toll it took on me and my family. While the car was a symbol of achievement, it became a reminder of the sacrifices and burdens we had to endure. This experience has been an eye-opener. It taught me that sometimes dreams can be more expensive than we anticipate, especially when they come at the cost of financial stability and family peace. The price of a dream, in this case, wasn't just the cost of the car itself, but the ripple effect it had on every aspect of my life. It forced me to confront the reality that material possessions, no matter how desirable, don't bring lasting happiness or fulfillment. In the end, I learned that dreams should be pursued with caution, and the true value of something lies not in its price tag, but in how it aligns with our values and long-term goals. The lesson I'll carry forward is that no dream is worth sacrificing what truly matters: peace of mind, financial health, and family harmony.